Imagine, if you will, a frog, but not just any frog. This particular frog has lived its entire existence at the very bottom of a small, dark, damp well.
Just a tiny little puddle.
Right, exactly. Born in the shadows of those circular stone walls, grew up there, and spends every single day diligently clearing the water of little worms and, microscopic bugs. And because of this daily routine, the frog gets sleek, it gets fat, and it is perfectly, absolutely content.
Because the well is its entire universe.
The whole thing. Then one day, another frog, a frog from the vast, boundless rolling sea, happens to fall from the opening above right into this exact same well.
Talk about a rude awakening.
Yeah. So the well frog looks at the newcomer, probably a bit territorial, and asks, "Where are you from?" The sea frog says, "I am from the sea."
And the well frog is skeptical, obviously.
Oh, completely. He says, "The sea, how big is that? Is it as big as my well?" And to demonstrate the sheer magnitude of what he considers large, the well frog takes a mighty leap from one side of the well to the other.
The biggest jump he knows.
Right. And he asks, "Is your sea this big?" And the sea frog just gently says, "My friend, how do you even begin to compare the sea with your little well?"
Which does not go over well.
Not at all. The well frog takes another leap, gets furious, and says, "Nothing can be bigger than my well. There is nothing bigger than this. This fellow is a liar, so turn him out."
It's an incredibly enduring story, and it serves as the perfect starting point for us today because it forces us to look in the mirror and ask a pretty uncomfortable question about our own lives.
Which is?
Well, how often are we sitting in our own little literal or metaphorical wells, looking up at a tiny restricted patch of sky and absolutely convincing ourselves that it is the entire universe?
Wow. Yeah, how often are we the well frog?
Yeah.
We all have our wells. And before we jump into breaking down the walls of those wells today, I have a very quick, humble favor to ask you, the listener.
Yes, please.
If you find value in these explorations, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this audio or video. Your support for the Simplified Summary channel is quite literally what allows us to keep bringing these profound deep dives directly to you. So thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting the Simplified Summary channel. Because today, we are embarking on a massive deep dive into the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume I Lectures and Discourses.
And we are pulling directly from his translated speeches, his writings, and his groundbreaking, genuinely historical addresses.
Yeah, especially that massive 1893 appearance.
Exactly. The world's Parliament of Religions in Chicago. This isn't just, a collection of old lectures. It represents a monumental collision of cultures and philosophies.
And the mission for our deep dive today is pretty ambitious. We are going to unpack these ancient spiritual laws, understand the text's definition of the true nature of the soul, and decode the secretive work, which the text calls karma yoga.
Right, and discover how this 19th century translation of ancient Eastern philosophy offers a surprisingly practical shortcut to living a better, more unified life today.
And just a quick reminder for you listening, as we explore these deeply religious and philosophical doctrines, our goal is not to endorse them as absolute truth. We are just here to impartially unpack the fascinating ideas contained in the source text.
Absolutely. And to really grasp the magnitude of these ideas, we have to look at the stage where they were introduced to the West. So picture Chicago in 1893.
Okay.
The world's Columbian Exposition is taking place. The West was in its absolute youth, culturally speaking, peak industrial age. They literally built the White City for the fair, illuminated by alternating current electricity.
A huge deal back then, a beacon of modern technology.
Exactly. The atmosphere was tumultuous, eager, overflowing with this aggressive modernity. And into this buzzing sea of young, inquisitive Western minds steps a monk in ochre robes.
Swami Vivekananda. It sounds almost like a time traveler stepping into a different century. He is representing what the text calls the mother of religions, Hinduism, and the most ancient order of monks in the world. So my question is, when he steps onto that global stage, facing an audience that represents entirely different, often aggressively competing religious doctrines, how does he avoid just starting a massive theological shouting match?
By completely subverting their expectations. I mean, the standard approach for a religious representative at that time, and often still today, is to claim exclusive truth. My way is the only way.
Right, my well is the biggest well.
Exactly. But behind the audience was this chaotic, rapid development of Europe and America, while behind Vivekananda, as the source describes it, lay an ocean of calm, long ages of spiritual development dating back to the Vedas. So he steps up and declares a radically different premise. He tells them, if one religion is true, then all the others also must be true.
That's a staggering thing to say to an audience of religious leaders who probably spent their entire lives studying why their specific path was the only correct one.
It really is. And the text emphasizes that the philosophy he presented doesn't merely tolerate other religions. That's a crucial distinction.
Because tolerance sounds nice.
But mere tolerance implies a subtle arrogance.
Yeah.
It implies that, I think you are fundamentally wrong, but I am generously allowing you to exist.
Right. I'm putting up with you.
Right. But the framework he presented goes much further. It accepts all religions as true. He actually quoted a childhood hymn that millions of people repeated every day in India. It goes, as the different streams having their sources in different places all mingle their water in the sea, all lead to thee.
Which brings us right back to the frog in the well. The Christian sits in his well and thinks it's the whole world. The Mohammedan sits in his well and thinks it's the whole world. The Hindu does the same. Every group has built these massive stone walls around their specific puddle.
And Vivekananda was standing there thanking America for making this grand attempt to finally break down those barriers. But he didn't just offer this as a nice, poetic thought. He painted a terrifying picture of the alternative.
What happens if we don't break down the wells?
Exactly. He spoke of sectarianism, bigotry, and fanaticism as horrible demons that have possessed the earth.
And he wasn't speaking metaphorically about the consequences, right? History is basically a ledger of what happens when those demons take over.
Precisely. He noted how these forces have drenched the earth in human blood, destroyed civilizations, and sent whole nations into despair. He fervently hoped that the bell tolling for that convention would be the death knell for all fanaticism. He was basically asking humanity to realize that people wending their way to the same ultimate goal shouldn't be slaughtering each other over the specific route they chose to take.
Yeah. If we accept this premise, that all these different paths can simultaneously be valid, it begs a massive question about the underlying architecture of reality. Like, what are the ground rules of the universe according to this philosophy that allow for such vast diversity in truth?
We have to look at how the text defines creation itself. It starts with the Vedas.
Now, when I hear Vedas, my mind immediately goes to ancient, dusty books sitting in a temple somewhere.
That is the common misconception. But the text specifically clarifies this. By the Vedas, no books are meant. The text defined them as the accumulated treasury of spiritual laws discovered by different persons in different times.
So it's an incredibly scientific way to look at it.
Very much so. Just as the law of gravitation existed before Isaac Newton discovered it, and would continue to exist even if all of humanity forgot it, this philosophy argues that spiritual laws exist independently of our awareness of them. The individuals who discover these pre-existing laws are called rishis.
And looking at the translation of his addresses, there is a detail that I found genuinely surprising. He explicitly points out that some of the very greatest of these rishis, these discoverers of universal spiritual laws, were women.
Which is a striking detail, especially considering he was presenting this to a Victorian-era Western audience in 1893. Women's roles in religious leadership back then were, well, fiercely restricted.
To say the least.
So this scientific approach to spiritual laws brings us to a fundamental concept in the text, the nature of creation itself. The Vedas teach that creation is without beginning and without end.
And that is a really hard concept to wrap the human mind around. We are so conditioned to think in terms of stories with a clear beginning, middle, and end.
It is hard. But to explain it, the text actually addresses the scientific concept of the conservation of energy. It points out that the sum total of cosmic energy is always the same. So if there was ever a time when literally nothing existed, where was all this manifested energy?
I suppose the traditional theological answer would be that it was resting in a potential form within a creator God who then decided to initiate a beginning.
And that is exactly the argument the text dismantles. It argues that if you say energy was resting in a potential form in a creator, that makes the creator mutable, meaning capable of change.
Sometimes potential, sometimes kinetic.
Right. And a core philosophical rule here is that if a creator changes, it is a compound entity, and everything compound eventually faces destruction, meaning God would eventually die, which the text dismisses as an absurd contradiction of the very definition of God. Therefore, there was never a time when there was no creation.
So how does the text visualize this relationship, if not as a watchmaker who builds a watch and then steps back?
The text uses a brilliant simile. Imagine creation and the creator as two lines running parallel to each other without beginning and without end. God is the ever-active providence, constantly evolving systems out of chaos, letting them run their course, and then destroying them to start the cycle again.
Like an eternal rhythm.
Exactly. Breathing out and breathing in, projecting and retracting.
Okay, that covers the macro level, the infinite universe, the suns, the moons. But let's bring this down to the micro level. What about me? If I stand here in my living room, close my eyes, and try to conceive of my own existence, if I think, what is that idea? Is it just an idea of a physical body? Because I'll be honest, if I'm infinite, I certainly don't feel infinite when I stub my toe on the coffee table.
You definitely feel the physical boundary there. But the text declares unequivocally that you are not the body. The philosophy asserts that you are a spirit living in a body. The physical form is merely a temporary housing.
But how does the text actually define that spirit?
The visual they use is stunning. The soul is described as a circle whose circumference is nowhere, but whose center is located in the body.
A circle whose circumference is nowhere, but the center is in the body. That is poetry. But what does it actually mean for human existence?
It means that the core of your awareness is anchored in this physical location right now, but your true nature is unbounded. Death, then, simply means the change of this center from one body to another. The soul itself is not bound by the conditions of matter. In its essence, it is free, unbounded, holy, and pure.
All right, here's where I have to play the skeptic, because this is where the high philosophy meets the harsh reality of the world. If the soul is perfectly pure and unbounded, and we are all these magnificent infinite circles, why is there so much suffering?
That's the big question.
Right. Why are some people born into terrible misery or severe illness, while others are born into perfect health and wealth? The text tackles this anomaly head-on. If we are all created out of nothing by a just and merciful God, why is this God so seemingly partial? Why make one person happy and another miserable from the very moment of birth?
It is the ultimate question of theodicy, the problem of evil and suffering. And the text argues that the standard idea of a creator God arbitrarily choosing to make one child suffer and another thrive doesn't actually explain the anomaly at all.
It just makes God look like a tyrant.
Precisely. It just expresses the cruel fiat of an all-powerful being. Instead, the philosophy explains this disparity through past actions, which is the concept of karma.
So it completely removes the blame from a capricious deity and places it squarely on the individual.
Completely. The text asserts there must have been causes before a person's birth to make them miserable or happy in this current life, and those causes are the direct result of their own past actions. The foundational rule is that we are entirely responsible for what we are. Nothing comes to us that we have not drawn to ourselves.
But, and this is the immediate glaring pushback, if I am responsible for my current state because of things I did in past lives, why don't I remember any of it? If I'm being punished or rewarded, shouldn't I at least have the memory of doing those things?
The text anticipates that exact skepticism, and the answer provided is one of the most elegant psychological analogies in the entire volume. It asks us to look at how memory actually works. Consciousness is described as only the surface of the mental ocean. Within the dark, unseen depths of that ocean, all our experiences are stored up.
Like a massive underwater hard drive.
Yeah, exactly. A hard drive. The analogy provided is your mother tongue, your native language. Right now, you are speaking English fluently. But you are not consciously holding every single word of the English dictionary in the front of your active mind.
No, of course not.
You aren't actively thinking about the word apple until the exact moment you need to use it. The knowledge is submerged. But the moment you try to recall a word, it rushes up from the depths to the surface.
That makes profound sense. Needed for immediate survival.
And the text claims that just as you can recall a forgotten word with effort, with the right struggle and disciplined practice, the depths of that massive memory ocean can be stirred up, eventually yielding complete reminiscence of past lives. The knowledge is there, merely latent.
This naturally leads us to how this infinite soul interacts with the physical world we see around us. And this brings us to what is arguably the most complex, but absolutely the most fascinating philosophical system discussed in the text Advaita Vedanta, or non-dualism.
Yes.
If the soul is infinite and creation is an endless cycle, how do we make sense of this very solid feeling, physical universe. My desk feels real. My body feels real.
Well, Advaita Vedanta posits something incredibly radical. It says there is only one thing that is truly, ultimately real in the entire universe, which it calls the absolute, or Brahman. Everything else, this entire universe of stars, planets, you, me, the chair you're sitting on, is an apparent manifestation. It's not really a separate thing.
So it's arguing that multiplicity is an illusion, that there aren't billions of different objects and people, just one single existence.
Yes. But to explain how the absolute, which is infinite and formless, suddenly appears as this highly fragmented finite universe, the text introduces the concept of Maya. Now, Maya is very often loosely translated as illusion, which makes people think the world is just a hallucination.
Right, like we're in the Matrix.
Exactly. But the text defines Maya much more specifically and scientifically. It defines Maya as time, space, and causation.
Time, space, and causation. The very fabric of physics.
Precisely. Time, space, and causation are described like a piece of glass, a prism, or a lens through which the absolute is seen. When you look at the infinite, unchangeable absolute through this distorting lens of Maya, it appears fragmented into the diverse chronological cause-and-effect universe we experience daily.
To make this abstract concept concrete, the text uses a very famous analogy, and I want to dive deep into this. The rope and the snake.
Oh, this is a great one.
Imagine a man walking down a dirt path in the dark of night. He looks down and sees what he thinks is a coiled snake in his path. He is absolutely terrified. His heart races, his adrenaline spikes, his body reacts exactly as if he is in mortal danger. He might even turn and run, potentially injuring himself in the dark. But then someone brings a lantern. A light shines on the object, and he sees that it is merely a coiled piece of rope.
The psychology of this analogy is brilliant. Let's look at the mechanics of that illusion. The rope never actually changed into a snake. It didn't physically transform. The snake was only an apparent reality caused entirely by the man's ignorance, his lack of illumination.
And this is the crucial part, while he believed it was a snake, his terror, his physiological reaction, his suffering was entirely real to him.
The fear was real, even if the object of the fear was not.
Exactly. And as soon as the light of knowledge shines, the snake doesn't crawl away into the bushes. It doesn't slowly fade. It vanishes entirely because it never existed in the first place. All that remains is the rope.
And Vivekananda applies this ancient analogy directly to our modern lives. Our individual identities, this little personalized self that we cling to so fiercely, our egos, our job titles, our bank accounts, that is the snake. Because we look through the lens of time, space, and causation, we think we are separate from the universe. We think we are separate from each other.
And because we feel separate, we feel fear. We feel jealousy. We feel hatred, anxiety, and misery. We are terrified of the snake.
We spend our whole lives fighting snakes that don't exist.
Wow. But when we realize that we are actually the rope, that we are all manifestations of the one single universal soul, Brahman, the illusion of separation, and all the misery that comes with it just vanishes.
This realization is not just a philosophical parlor trick to make you feel peaceful. The text argues that this framework provides the ultimate, airtight, logical foundation for all human ethics. Think about it. Every major religion in the world says some variation of do not injure or love your neighbor as yourself.
Sure.
But the text points out that none of them really explain why you should do that, other than because God commanded it or because you will be punished if you don't.
Which is essentially just ethics via threat of divine retribution.
Right. But Advaita provides a metaphysical, almost physical reason for ethics. You shouldn't injure your neighbor because physically and spiritually there is only one soul.
If the universe is just one unbroken mass of matter and one unbroken mass of spirit, then in injuring another person, you are quite literally injuring yourself. It's like your left hand stabbing your right hand. It's madness.
Exactly. In loving another, you are loving yourself. The text sums up the entirety of Advaita morality in one profound word: self-abnegation. It is the process of getting rid of the little selfish I that causes all the struggle and friction in the world.
Now, understanding that on an intellectual level is one thing. I could sit here and nod and say, yes, we're all one. But how do I actually live that when I have to go to work on Monday morning? I have a boss, I have bills, I have a mortgage. I can't just sit under a tree contemplating the rope and the snake.
Right, you still have to live in the world.
The text transitions from this high abstract philosophy to rigorous practicality through the concept of karma yoga.
Yes. Karma yoga is defined by the text as the knowledge of the secret of work. It is the practical application of these spiritual laws for the person who is active in the world.
So if I accept that I shouldn't be governed by my ego, How do I actually stop my brain from constantly worrying about the results of my daily grind? Does the text offer a toolkit for that?
It starts by reframing what work actually is. The text says that every action we take, every word we speak, even every single breath, is like a blow struck upon the soul. These blows act like friction on a piece of flint, striking the fire and bringing out the knowledge and power that is already inherent within the soul. You aren't acquiring something from the outside. You are polishing the mirror of your own mind through action.
And here's a piece of advice from the text that feels incredibly relevant to our modern burnout culture. It says, pay as much attention to the means of work as to its end.
It is a radical shift in perspective. Our great defect in the modern world, as the text observes, is that we are so magnetically drawn to the ideal, to the end goal, the promotion, the finished project, the financial milestone, that we obsess over it and completely neglect the actual present moment steps required to get there.
We just want the prize.
Right. But the logic is inescapable. The end is just the natural result of the means. If the means are perfected, if the daily action is done with absolute focus and integrity, the end must come. It's cause and effect.
But the biggest psychological trap we fall into is attachment. We don't just work. We work for something. We work for money, for fame, for status, or even just for someone to say thank you. And when we don't get that specific result, we are miserable. The text offers a solution that sounds almost impossible at first hearing. Work incessantly, but give up all attachment to work.
Be a giver. Give without asking for anything in return. The text argues that the moment you expect a return, you create a transaction. And transactions leave you vulnerable to disappointment, anger, and misery. If you give up the attachment to the result, you entirely elude the grasp of misery.
I can hear people saying, well, if I'm not attached to the result, why would I fight for anything? Why wouldn't I just become passive and let people walk all over me?
The text anticipates this exact misinterpretation, and it uses a profound story from the Bhagavad Gita to illustrate the difference between true detachment and mere cowardice. It's the story of Arjuna.
The great warrior.
Right. Arjuna is facing a massive impending battle, but he looks across the battlefield and sees that the opposing army includes his own relatives, his friends, and his former teachers. Overwhelmed, he drops his weapons and tells his charioteer, who is the incarnation of God, Krishna, that he doesn't want to fight. Arjuna claims he is choosing peace out of love and a desire for non-resistance.
Which sounds incredibly noble. It sounds like exactly what a spiritual person should do. We all want to just avoid conflict and call it peace.
But Krishna's reaction is shocking. He doesn't praise Arjuna. He calls him a hypocrite and a coward.
Why? Why is choosing not to fight considered cowardly here?
Because true non-resistance, true forgiveness, only exists when you actually have the power to resist. If you are weak, if you are terrified, if you literally cannot fight back and you claim you are forgiving your enemy, you are just deceiving yourself. You are hiding your inherent cowardice behind a mask of high morality.
Wow.
You aren't peaceful, you are harmless. The text argues that a grand act of love is when you have the absolute dominant power of resistance and you consciously, deliberately choose to renounce it.
That forces such a brutal self-evaluation.
Yeah.
Are you forgiving someone because you are truly unattached and loving, or are you just avoiding a confrontation you are simply too afraid to have? Karma Yoga teaches us to strengthen ourselves, to dive into the world and do our duty without running away, but to do it without being hopelessly entangled by the selfish desire for the rewards. It is active engagement, internal detachment.
But achieving that state of internal detachment while engaged in intense external action requires immense mental discipline. It requires an understanding of how the mind actually functions. And this brings us to another major system discussed in the text, Raja Yoga, which is essentially the mechanics of the mind.
If Karma Yoga is the philosophy of action, Raja Yoga feels like the laboratory manual. The text breaks down the entire universe into two fundamental interactive forces, Akasha and Prana.
Yes, Akasha is described as the infinite, omnipresent material of the universe. It is the subtle matter from which everything physical is formed, from gases to liquids to solids. Prana, on the other hand, is the infinite manifesting power or energy of the universe.
So Akasha is the clay, and Prana is the sculptor's hands.
Exactly. Everything from the physical motion of planets in orbit, to the gravity pulling them, to the tiny electrical nerve currents in your body, to the very force of your abstract thoughts, it is all just different manifestations of Prana working upon Akasha.
And when it comes to the human body, the text identifies the most concentrated, mysterious, and powerful form of this Prana. It is called Kundalini, the coiled-up energy resting at the base of the spine.
What is genuinely fascinating here is how Vivekananda strips away the cheap mysticism and superstitions surrounding supernatural phenomena. We've all heard stories of people performing miracles or having sudden flashes of deep prophetic wisdom or feeling that their prayers have been miraculously answered by an external force.
Right.
Vivekananda completely reframes that. He argues that they didn't get magic from the outside. The text asserts that whenever someone experiences these phenomena, they have actually just ignorantly, accidentally stumbled upon a practice that set free a tiny portion of this coiled up Kundalini energy within themselves.
It is an incredibly psychological approach for the 19th century. He is saying that what you call a miracle is just a higher biological and psychological function that you haven't yet learned how to control. Raja Yoga is the systematic science of learning how to tap into that internal power consciously, predictably, rather than by accident.
But the text is very clear that you cannot just jump into trying to manipulate this massive internal energy. There are strict prerequisites. You have to build a foundation or the energy will destroy you. These prerequisites are the yamas and niyamas, or the vows.
And these are not presented as religious dogmas. They are presented as universal practical vows that apply to every human being, regardless of their nation, country, or position in society. They are the ethical bedrock necessary to calm the mind. They include non-killing, truthfulness, non-stealing, chastity, and non-receiving of gifts.
Let's look at why these are necessary, not just as moral commands, but as psychological tools. Take truthfulness. If you are constantly lying, your brain is working overtime to keep track of the fabrications. Your mind is agitated, constantly defending an illusion. You cannot achieve deep concentration if your baseline mental state is anxiety over being caught in a lie.
Exactly. And the non-receiving of gifts is about independence. If you are constantly taking favors, you are psychologically indebted to others. Your mind is bound by obligation. You are not free. Alongside these behavioral vows are internal and external purification.
Which is so important.
I have to highlight how wonderfully blunt the text is about purification. It literally says, a dirty man will never be a yogi.
I love that quote.
It is so incredibly pragmatic. You have to keep your physical body clean, your environment clean, and your internal mind clean from negative, swirling thoughts before you can even hope to control the massive, subtle energies of the mind. You can't put the cart before the horse. You can't reach enlightenment if you refuse to clean your room.
If we step back and look at the broader theme of all these different yogas, the path of knowledge, the path of action, the path of mind control, we see a constant masterful synthesis of ideas. Vivekananda did not view the history of human thought as man traveling from error to truth. He viewed it as man traveling from lower truth to higher truth. Each stage, each religion, each philosophy is necessary for a particular time and a particular mindset.
The analogy he uses for this is the 6 fingers. He said if a man has 6 fingers, it's a diseased abnormality, right? Nature generally intends for us to have 5. Therefore, if only one religion in the entire world were true, and all the thousands of other religious experiences, texts, and revelations throughout human history were entirely false, then that one true religion would be a diseased abnormality. The very fact that the search for the infinite exists in every culture proves it is a universal law of the human mind, just manifesting differently based on local conditions.
This broad acceptance is why he spoke so highly of Buddhism, even though it differs significantly from traditional Orthodox Hinduism. In India, the text notes, Buddha was eventually accepted as an incarnation of God. But Vivekananda points out that Buddha's glory was not in complex metaphysics. In fact, Buddhism is largely agnostic regarding a supreme creator. Buddha's glory was his immense, bleeding heart for humanity and his fierce, uncompromising antagonism toward priestcraft, ritualistic gatekeeping, and social inequality.
Vivekananda said the ultimate goal for a human being is to have the intellect of a Shankara with the heart of a Buddha. Shankara being the great, brilliant philosopher who formalized the hyperlogical system of Advaita non-dualism we discussed earlier, so that the goal is a perfect balance of razor-sharp, unflinching logical truth and boundless practical compassion for the suffering of others.
And it was exactly that practical compassion that led to a very striking, almost provocative observation Vivekananda made while touring America. Remember the context. He was a monk from a colonized, impoverished nation, visiting the wealthiest, most rapidly industrializing, and arguably the most materially boastful nation on earth. And his message to them was remarkably pragmatic. He said, "The cry all over the world is less doctrine and more bread."
It is such a powerful, grounded moment in the text. He bluntly stated that India had religious doctrine to spare. They had mountains of philosophy. But what the people desperately needed was bread. He was directly challenging the prevalent Western practice of sending Christian missionaries to India to preach complex theology to people who were literally starving to death.
He argued that it is an insult to a starving people to offer them religion. It would be infinitely better to send fewer men with doctrine and more money for food. Religion, he insisted, is not for empty stomachs. You cannot preach the high philosophy of the soul to someone whose primary reality is visceral physical agony.
It grounds the entire philosophical flight we've taken today. It insists that spirituality isn't an escape from the physical world. It must address the physical world. The text insists that true religion is not a negative nonsense. It is not groaning under the oppression of life, calling yourself a miserable sinner, and just hoping for a reward in some paradise after you die.
Religion in this framework is immensely positive. It is the active, joyful manifestation of the divinity already within you. As he passionately urged his audience in one of the lectures, teach your children that they are divine. Do not teach them that they are weak.
The ultimate takeaway here is profound self-reliance. All knowledge is in the human mind. Whether it is the physical law of gravity or the deepest metaphysical spiritual truth, it isn't out there waiting to be beamed into our heads from the clouds. It is inside, covered by a veil of ignorance, like the dust on a mirror. And learning, experiencing life, working it, is just the process of taking that veil off. We are not weak, sinful, helpless creatures tossed around by an angry God. We are the architects of our own karma. We are the creators of our own destiny.
And that brings us to a final thought, a perspective to build on everything we've unpacked today. If the universe truly is a manifestation of one single, unbroken reality, as Advaita philosophy claims, and you are, at your core, the very author of that reality experiencing itself, how does that change the way you will walk into your very next interaction today? When you look at the person across from you, whether it's your spouse, your boss, or a stranger on the street, if they are not a separate entity, but literally just another reflection of you in a different globule of water, how differently will you treat them?
What an incredible thought to carry with us. You are the rope, not the snake. Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive deep dive. If this shift in perspective sparked an aha moment for you, please drop a comment on the video and let us know what stood out to you. And remember to subscribe, like, and share this with a friend who might need to look beyond the stone walls of their own little well today. Support this Simplified Summary channel so we can keep bringing you these deep dives. Until next time, keep questioning the illusions, keep learning, and remember you are the universe exploring itself.